Part 1, The Vacancy That Watches Back. Hello. I know why you're here. Not just for a story, but to drift into sleep. And maybe, just maybe, touch the edge of something darker while you dream. But if you're watching this, know that some dreams don't let go. They follow you home. They wait inside your walls. So before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel. And tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Because by the end, you might not trust your clock anymore. Now, get comfortable. But not too comfortable. The neon sign flickered like a dying insect, bathing the cracked parking lot in a nauseating pink hue. Moonlight Motel, vacancy. The last word pulsed in stuttering rhythm, like it was struggling to hold its breath. I'd been driving for 3 straight days. Midwestern highways had become a blur of cornfields and exhaustion. My body ached, my eyes burned, and even caffeine had turned against me. As I stepped out of my car, my Honda's engine ticked into silence. The only sound besides the interstate's ghostly hum in the distance. The building looked like it had given up years ago. Peeling paint, windows dark and clouded from inside. The vacancy felt permanent. Like a wound that refused to heal. Still, I needed rest. Any place flat would do. The lobby door opened with a mechanical groan. Like it hadn't been touched in weeks. Inside, the air was stale. Saturated with the ghosts of cheap disinfectant and old cigarette smoke. But beneath it was something else. Something organic. Rotten. Behind a scratched plexiglass partition stood the clerk. Pale, sunken eyes. Yellow teeth. Hands that didn't seem to move unless I looked away. He slid me a key without a word. Just a nod. The plastic tag attached was shaped like a diamond. Its once red paint now oxidized into a rusted brown. Room 237. The key felt warm. Too warm. I climbed the creaking staircase. Each step bowed inward slightly. The second-floor hallway stretched before me like a throat. Narrow, dark, and pulsing with unseen breath. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, blinking with a rhythm that felt wrong. Deliberate, almost sentient. They didn't just flicker. They observed. The carpet beneath my boots squelched slightly. Damp in places. As if something had seeped up from underneath. Walls lined with wallpaper that may once have been floral were now the color of old bruises. Soft purples turned gray. Yellow flowers wilted into grotesque shapes. I passed room 231. 233. 235. Each door nearly identical. But each one had its own presence. I could feel eyes where there were none. And then, room 237. Flanked by a sealed door labeled 238. And a rusted utility closet. The door to my room opened without resistance. That's when I felt it. The pressure. The sense that something had shifted. Like the hallway had exhaled. And now I was inside the lung. The room was a time capsule of decay. A riot of colors that once screamed 1975. Now sagged into dull orange and mustard shadows. The ceiling bulged in places, water stained into maps of forgotten lands. The mattress sagged like it had been mourning something. And the bedspread. It looked like it had witnessed things. Things that stained not just fabric, but memory. But it was the walls that disturbed me most. The same wallpaper from the hallway. But here, it peeled like dead skin. Behind each curl of faded paper was more than just wood. There were holes. Windows. Darkness where there should be studs. I set my bag down. And moved closer. Drawn in spite of myself. A breath held behind the wall. I pulled a strip loose. Shined my flashlight into the gap. And what I saw defied logic. The space inside the wall was deep. Deeper than it should be. Wooden beams. A strange lattice. Not built for structure. Built for movement. Tiny corridors. Narrow walkways. As if the building housed something inside. Not pipes. Not wires. But something else. And then a sound. A shuffle. Fabric brushing wood. Clothes. I jerked back. Heart thundering. Had I imagined it? The mind plays tricks when exhausted. That's what I told myself. But when I tried to move the dresser closer to the bed, the sound came again. This time, louder. From behind the wall. I pressed my ear against the faded wallpaper. Silence. And then a murmur. A whisper. Like voices distorted by water and wood. Doesn't belong. In our bed. Watching, always watching. I froze. Not voices from another room. From inside the structure. Inside the architecture. I peeled more paper. The hole widened. The tunnels behind. Darker than before. Then I saw it. A shadow. Thin. Too thin. Moving, crawling, walking upright in a space. Too small for anything human. And when it paused. And turned. I knew I'd made a mistake. It had no eyes. But it still saw me. Part 2, the walls remember faces. The moment I saw it. That distorted figure in the wall. My instincts screamed. It was human in form. But barely. Its limbs were unnaturally long. Flattened like pressed flowers between forgotten pages. Its skin looked almost papery. Creased and yellowed, like something ancient. When it raised an arm. If you could call it that. Its fingers stretched far too long. Knuckles backward. Like it had learned movement in reverse. And then it pointed at me. Not aimlessly. Not abstractly. It knew. It recognized me. Not as a guest. But as an intruder. The sound it made. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a whisper. It was a violation. A wrongness that scraped against language. A hiss soaked in contempt. I staggered backward. Dropped my phone. Its flashlight spun across the room like a wounded eye. The shadows danced. And the walls. They watched them dance. I lunged for the phone. Fumbling in the dim chaos. The light caught the reflection of something moving inside the wall. Closer now. More of them. At least 3. Shadows within shadows. My first thought was to run. But the door. I'd blocked it with the dresser. The same dresser that now felt twice as heavy. As if the room itself didn't want me to leave. I shoved with everything I had. Inch by inch, it groaned across the floor. Wood screeching like bone across steel. Behind me, something emerged from the wall. I didn't dare look. But I heard it. The wet stretch of skin deforming. A grunt. Not pain. But exertion. Like a body crawling through a birth canal never meant to be used again. I screamed and pushed harder. The dresser moved just enough. My hand closed around the doorknob. But it didn't turn. It was stuck. No. Held. As if something on the other side was pressing back. The cold metal vibrated in my palm. And I realized. It was breathing. I stumbled away. Backpedaling into the room's center. The walls throbbed. Wallpaper fluttered like lungs. The gaps widened. Hands, long, skeletal, pushed through, followed by shoulders. Then eyeless faces. They were not just inside the walls. They were the walls. In that moment, something clicked. A knowing. Like the room had shared a secret with me. These things. They weren't ghosts. They weren't alive. They were memories. Trapped in wood and paint and wallpaper. Flattened souls. Echoes of those who had stayed in room 237. And never left. And now, they remembered me. One of the figures stepped forward. Its jaw unhinging downward in a silent scream. Inside its mouth were not teeth, but photographs. Dozens of them. Stuck to its tongue. Fluttering like bats. Faces of guests. All staring. All afraid. All familiar. Because I'd seen one of them. In the lobby. Behind the counter. The clerk. The man with the yellowed teeth. The whispers grew louder. But now, I could understand them. Another name for the ledger. Another fold in the wood. You sleep, you stay, you flatten. A rhythm formed. Not just voices. A chant. Ritualistic. The figures began to circle the room. Their bodies impossibly thin. Arms dragging across the walls. Smearing black residue like ink from a cursed fountain pen. Symbols appeared. Runes. Words. Old English. Not written. Etched into the wood beneath the peeling paper. I recognized one word. Binding. They were trying to bind me. Into the room. Into the walls. To add me to the network. I backed toward the bathroom. The only door they hadn't yet approached. Slammed the door shut and locked it. Breathed hard. The silence here was immediate. Too immediate. Like I had entered a pocket of time that didn't belong. The mirror above the sink reflected my haggard face. Eyes wide. Skin pale. Sweat clinging to my neck. But something was wrong. In the reflection. The door behind me was open. I turned. Still shut. Still locked. But in the mirror. It opened wider. Figures stood just beyond the threshold. Heads tilted in unnatural angles. Then, the me in the mirror smiled. But I wasn't smiling. My lips were still. I stared into that mirror. At the smiling me. And it whispered. Stay. Just a little longer. Sleep. Let us smooth your edges. Behind the mirror version of myself. The hallway filled with those creatures. Tall, twisted, translucent like grease on glass. I realized the motel wasn't haunted. It was hungry. And those that stayed weren't devoured. They were repurposed. Turned into fragments of the architecture. Permanent tenants. Rewritten into wallpaper. Floorboards. Mirror reflections. I was next. Unless I didn't think. I acted. Grabbed the mirror. Shattered it. Glass scattered like frozen lightning. The reflection screamed. Not just in sound. In motion. Every part of the motel shuddered. As if I'd broken one of its arteries. I bolted. Threw open the bathroom door. And the room was empty. No figures. No whispers. The wallpaper was whole. The floor dry. My phone on the nightstand, fully charged. Had it all been? No. I looked at the dresser. The deep gouge marks still scraped across the floor. The peeling wallpaper still curled upward. And in the silence, just faintly, a voice, from behind the wall. "You're still here." Part 3, Room 237 doesn't let go. I stood in the middle of room 237. Shaking. Alone. But not. The silence was too clean. Like a room freshly staged for an open house. The mattress now lay perfectly flat. No sag. The wallpaper hung in smooth, undisturbed lines. Even the buzzing of the hallway lights had stopped. But the dresser, the one I had dragged across the room in a panic, still bore deep gouges in the carpet. The mirror in the bathroom was whole again, its surface unbroken. But I didn't dare look at it. Instead, I picked up my phone. Hands trembling. It was 3:13 a.m. Only 15 minutes had passed. But it felt like hours. Like I'd lived an entire life inside those walls. I moved to the door. This time, it opened with no resistance. The hallway beyond was unchanged. But the carpet beneath my feet was wet. Not from water. From footprints. Long, thin. Bare. They led into my room. But none led out. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt thicker. Like I had to push through it. Room 235. Room 233. Room 231. All the doors were shut. But now, they were different. Scratches around the knobs. Smears on the peepholes. Faint shapes behind the curtains. I walked toward the stairwell. Heart pounding. But when I reached the bottom, I wasn't in the lobby. I was back on the second floor. My breath caught. I turned. Ran down the hall. Tried again. Different stairs. Same result. No matter where I went. Every path led back to room 237. The motel had changed. It no longer obeyed physics. It obeyed memory. My memory. Back in the lobby. I found the counter abandoned. No clerk. No hum of fluorescent light. Just the endless buzz of the neon sign outside. Behind the counter sat an old book. A guest ledger. Its pages yellowed and cracking. The cover worn velvet. Faded red. I opened it. Inside were hundreds of names. Each written in the same stiff hand. No checkout dates. Some entries had photos clipped beside them. Grainy Polaroids. Faded smiles. And then, toward the back, my name. Written in ink still drying. Room 237 next to it. Below it, a note. Observed. Will resist. Flatten soon. My vision blurred. The words crawled across the page. Twisting, reshaping. Until I saw images instead. Not in the book. But in my head. A woman screaming as the walls closed in. A man trying to crawl through the vents. Only to disappear into the drywall. Children's laughter echoing in a room. Where no children ever stayed. This place didn't keep guests. It absorbed them. I fled the lobby. Back down the corridor. Rooms blurred past me. Numbers twitching like clock hands. And then I saw it. A figure. Sitting on the floor outside room 239. An old man. Thin. Pale. Fingers raw from scratching the walls. He looked up at me. His eyes were full of centuries. "You're early," he said. His voice dry as paper. "I stayed here too long. Got folded between the floors. Now they use me to test the new ones." I opened my mouth to speak. But he raised a hand. Don't talk. They listened through the bulbs. He pointed at the light overhead. You're in their pages now. The room remembers you. It will keep folding you into its story. Until there's nothing left but wallpaper and noise. Then he smiled. The saddest smile I've ever seen. But maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe you'll wake up and find this was a dream. Only. He leaned forward. Try not to sleep in there again. That's when the walls press hardest. I didn't mean to return. But my legs carried me. And there I stood again. In front of room 237. The door opened on its own. This time. The light inside was red. Dim, but pulsing. Like something alive was waiting in the ceiling. I stepped in. The bed was made. A single chocolate on the pillow. But above it, the ceiling bulged. A blister in the plaster. Wet and heaving. It pulsed in time with my heart. I stared at it. And it opened. Not cracked. Opened. An eye. Massive, bloodshot. Lidless. Peered down at me. And in that gaze, I saw everything. The clerk's true face. The building's shifting history. The layers of rooms that existed not in space, but in memory. Dozens stacked atop one another. Each occupied by someone who thought they'd leave. The eye stared. And then, it spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts. A deep, booming pressure inside my skull. You are not a guest. You are a draft. An unfinished page in our ledger. Rest. Reshape. Let the motel finish writing you. I dropped to my knees. Overwhelmed. But something inside me. Some thin thread of will. Resisted. I grabbed the dresser again. Pulled it to the wall. And smashed it against the peeling wallpaper. The wood cracked. A hole opened. This time, not a passage. But a glimpse of outside. Of sky. Of moonlight. Of freedom. I ran for it. As the eye above me screamed in a voice of warping glass. Part 4. Guests who leave become something else. The hole I had smashed in the wall. It wasn't plaster. It wasn't wood. It bled. A thick, amber fluid seeped from the wound. Sweet-smelling at first. But underneath. Metallic. Rancid. Still. On the other side was air. Real air. Moonlight shimmered through the crack. A way out. I didn't think. I crawled. The opening closed behind me. The wall knitting itself like scar tissue. The room. Gone. I was inside something else now. Not a hallway. Not a basement. A throat. The walls here were different. Not drywall. Not wood. Flesh. Pulsing. Veined. Lined with fibrous muscle that twitched. When I touched it, the air was wet. Thick with breath. I wasn't inside a building. I was inside its body. The motel was alive. Not metaphorically. Literally. Each room was a lung. Each corridor a vein. Each guest a cell to be harvested. And I was in its stomach. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Domed. Dripping. Lit by phosphorescent veins that pulsed green and violet. In the center stood a figure. Or rather, floated. Tall, robed in parchment. Skin the color of moth wings. Eyes ink black and endless. Its voice came not from a mouth, but from the shifting air around it. We remember you, it said. You tried to leave. You looked into the walls. You saw the network. You heard the chorus. You were not meant to wake. It unfurled a scroll. Dozens of feet long. Covered in names. I recognized some. Hotel guests. Real people. Dead. Or worse, still alive. But trapped in loops within the motel's folds. The moment you entered, the archivist continued. You were being written. Your choices, your fears. Ink on damp paper. I stepped back. Nowhere to run. The tunnel behind had sealed shut. You can become a wall, it said. A quiet watcher. Smooth and helpful. Others will brush against you and never know. You'll sleep forever. Or... It gestured to another passage. One lined with mirrors. Each one showing versions of myself. Older, younger, bleeding, laughing, screaming. Each frozen in a moment I'd forgotten or denied. Walk into the library. The place where broken guests scream themselves into stories. I asked. What happens if I refuse both? The archivist tilted its head. Then you remain here. Between sentences. A page without a place. And pages that do not fit. It let the sentence hang. Then slowly tore a blank sheet in half. I took the mirror path. My reflection warped with every step. One smiled. Another convulsed. A third pounded its fists against the glass, screaming. Don't become the ending. Then. The library. Not books. People. Lined up like tomes. Bound. Stacked. Their mouths sewn shut with thread made of hotel key tags. Their eyes followed me. Begging without sound. A sign hung from the ceiling, carved into bone. Shelved. But not forgotten. And walking among them. Another figure. Smaller than the archivist. But faster. It wore a bellhop uniform. Its face was missing. Not torn, just never written. It dragged a suitcase behind it. From inside the suitcase. Knocking. The bellhop stopped. Turned toward me. Opened the suitcase. Inside. A small room. Room 237. Tiny. Detailed. A dollhouse version. Inside it. A woman. Old, with eyes like ink wells. She spoke without moving her lips. I checked in 1973. I was the first. The room made itself around me. Then it grew hungry. Her voice trembled. Each time someone opens the door, the motel folds another layer. Time stacks. People flatten. She reached out. But her hand stopped at the edge of her tiny world. Please, she whispered. Don't sleep in the bed. That's where it binds you. That's where it copies you. And then she vanished. Folded backward like paper under fire. The bellhop closed the suitcase. The library walls began to pulse. Pages fluttering in a wind that wasn't there. A doorway opened. And once again, I stood outside room 237. The hallway was silent. Timeless. Inside. The bed was made. Warm. Inviting. Fresh sheets that smelled like lavender and something ironic underneath. I stood at the threshold. Torn. Exhausted. If I slept, would I finally escape? Or become part of the walls? Behind me, the bellhop waited. And just before the door closed, I heard the voice of the woman from the suitcase again. Don't let it finish writing you. Part 5. The bed that writes back. The door closed behind me. With a soft click. Too gentle to be mechanical. Like a sigh. Like lungs exhaling. I stood at the edge of the bed. Room 237's terrible heart. The sheets were smooth. White and untouched. But beneath them, I could feel warmth. Not from the mattress. From something within it. A presence. Breathing. Waiting. I sat. And the whispers began again. Soft. Cooing. Like a mother trying to hush a child before a lie. Rest now. You've run enough. We will carry you into story. I laid back. The ceiling above me shimmered. The air thickened. And I was no longer awake. But not yet asleep. I was in the space between ink and intention. The moment my eyes closed, they opened again. But I was no longer in room 237. Not exactly. The bed. The walls. The decor. All similar. But subtly wrong. The wallpaper had moving patterns. The lamp blinked like an eye. And when I looked into the mirror, I wasn't me. I was someone else. Older. Tired. A woman this time. Dressed in a 1960s motel uniform. Name tag, Gloria. I am Gloria. I checked into room 237 in 1964. But I didn't check in. I worked here. I managed the keys. I smiled at strangers. I died in this room. Again. And again. And now, I was reliving her final night. Gloria was making the bed. That same bed. Straightening the same pillow. Behind her, the door creaked open. A guest stood there. Face shadowed. He stepped in. Said nothing. But when she turned, he was gone. And there were footprints on the ceiling. Gloria stepped back. The lights flickered. And suddenly, she was in the lobby. But it was upside down. Guests walked on the ceiling. Keys dangled from the floor. A voice echoed through the twisted room. Welcome back, Gloria. You've checked in again. She screamed. But her mouth made no sound. Because it wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. I tried to wake. But my body didn't respond. Because I no longer had just one. I was Gloria. I was the man from the ledger. I was the bellhop. I was the child screaming inside the vent. I was the archivist writing my own end. Each identity flickered like a slide reel. Each shift accompanied by the sound of paper tearing. And outside, in the real room 237, my body stirred. Because something else was climbing in. The bed. It didn't just take. It invited. Every time someone lay down, they became vulnerable to overwrite. A blank draft for another soul to use. And now, someone else wanted my story. In the dream, the bed beneath me changed. It sprouted arms. Not fingers, but quills. Feathered pens. They crawled up my spine. And began to write. On my skin. Under it. Through it. Every memory I had was rewritten into something else. I wasn't from Chicago. I never owned a Honda. I never worked that miserable office job. I was born in the motel. Raised by the archivist. I existed to observe others as they arrived. I watched them dream. I watched them flatten. I recorded their final thoughts. And then I prepared the bed. For the next guest. But just as the ink reached my throat, a voice whispered from the pillow. Not you. Not yet. It was the old woman. The one from the suitcase. You still remember your name. That means something. Grab it. Hold it. Rip yourself out. I focused. Hard. On my name. On my mother's voice. On the first snow I ever saw. On the way black coffee tastes at 3 a.m. Real things. Personal things. Things not written in this motel script. And with one breath, I screamed it. My name. The bed jolted. I opened my eyes. Back in room 237. Morning light. Birdsong. A soft knock at the door. Everything looked normal. Peaceful. Too peaceful. I sat up. Checked my skin. No ink. No scars. But the mirror. The mirror didn't reflect the room. It reflected the library. And in it, a version of me. Still asleep. Being written upon. And in the corner of the real room, the bedside, a soft, contented exhale. As if it had tasted something. And saved a copy. Part 6, The ink remains. The sunlight was real. The warmth, even more so. Birds sang outside the paper-thin windows. A new day. But the bed creaked with a slow, rhythmic breath. Not because of movement. Because it remembered. And on the inside of my wrist, a mark. Small. Barely visible. An ink blot. Like something had started to draw me. And stopped. I ran my fingers over it. It pulsed. I stood. Grabbed my bag. Opened the door. And stopped. Because the hallway wasn't empty. It was waiting. Room 235. The door was open. Inside, a man sat cross-legged on the bed. Smiling into nothing. He didn't blink. Didn't move. Room 233. A woman scribbled into the walls with her own blood. Writing names. Thousands of them. Overlapping. Each letter warping the plaster beneath it. Room 231. A child stood in front of a blank television. Whispering. He's not real yet. But if I keep saying the lines, he will be. I didn't knock. I didn't ask. I ran. I reached my car. Still there. Still ticking from the night chill. The keys in my pocket. The ignition growled to life. A rare mercy. I looked at the motel one last time. It looked ordinary. Deserted. Like it had always been. And yet, as I backed out, something shifted in the rearview mirror. Not the building. The sky. The clouds above the Moonlight Motel. Formed words. Huge, impossible. Written in the light. You were not erased. And beneath that, we continue. 3 states away. 2 showers. A full night's sleep in my own bed. But nothing was right. My coffee machine brewed ink. The water in my sink ran black before clearing. My books had new titles. On my shelf. Room 237, a memoir. By my name. I hadn't written it. I opened the book. First chapter. The neon sign buzzed like a dying insect. My words. My memory. My story, written without me. And on the last page, a sentence still forming. Ink wet. Still writing itself. He thought he had escaped. But the motel was patient. And stories don't end. They only close the door behind you. My apartment creaked at night. Walls too thin. But now they whispered. Same voices. Same complaints. Get out of our room. He's rewriting it wrong. We were here first. I opened a closet. And behind the coats, a strip of wallpaper I didn't recognize. Faded gold. Brown bruised pattern. Room 237 skin. I pulled at it. Beneath. Wooden beams. Old. Dry. And beyond that. A gap. A passage. They were here. Inside my home. Or worse. I was still inside theirs. I tried burning the book. Tried tearing out pages. But they grew back. Sometimes with new words. Sometimes with new voices. Once, it wrote. Stop. We like this one. Let him finish the story. And now, whenever I sleep, I return. Not to the motel. To drafts of it. Rooms that never existed. Halls made of memories I don't recognize. In one dream, I opened a door. And saw myself. Still in room 237. Asleep. And something watching from the ceiling. I screamed. And the version of me in the bed opened his eyes. They were black ink. And he smiled. Part 7, the motel has an ending for you. I stopped sleeping. I unplugged the clocks. I taped the mirrors. But the book kept appearing. In the fridge. Under the sink. In the back seat of my locked car. Always titled. The Guest Who Wouldn't Leave. And every time. A new chapter. Written in ink that hadn't dried. Pages whispering as I flipped them. And then one day, I opened the first page. And found a sentence I never wrote. He returned to where it began. It was time. I drove back. Through cornfields and dead gas stations. Past billboards rotting in the sun. But where the Moonlight Motel had been, there was nothing. An empty lot. Cracked asphalt. Grass growing through the scars. Except, in the center, a single item. A bellhop's hat. Weatherless. Waiting. I picked it up. And when I did, the wind spoke. It moved. You brought it with you. The Moonlight Motel doesn't sit on land now. It's viral. It exists in interruption. Between dreams. In déjà vu. Inside stories that end mid-sentence. Anywhere you forget where you are for a second. And remember too late. The ink on my wrist had begun to spread. Thin branches, like veins. Snaking toward my palm. I needed to find the first page. The original entry. The name that started it. And that meant going underneath. I opened the book one last time. This time, the pages pulled me in. Not metaphorically. Not a dream. Literally. Paper crumpled around me like skin. The world flattened. Depth erased. I fell sideways into narrative. When I landed, the air smelled of mildew. And distant typewriter clacks echoed like gunshots. I was inside the story. Not my story. The motel's. And ahead of me, a staircase made of receipt paper. Each step labeled with a room number. At the bottom of the stairs, a chamber lit by nothing but the glow of names. Stacks and stacks of ledgers. Each one bound in skin. That pulsed with breath. I opened one. Inside, thousands of names. Written in different hands. Some etched with nails. Some typed in trembling font. And at the top of the very first page. Name, Jeremiah Vane. Check-in date, August 3, 1923. Room, Origin. There was no checkout. Next to it, A note written in red. He made the bed. The bed made the story. A whisper behind me. You're not supposed to read that. I turned. And saw him. Old. Tall. Pale. Eyes ink blind. His mouth stained with black. Fingers dripping with story. Jeremiah Vane. He didn't invent the motel. He invoked it. He was the first to write it. As a horror novel. A game. An idea. And it had read him back. And loved what it saw. I only wanted a story that stayed, he said. But stories, they need to be fed. He pointed at the ink spreading up my arm. And you fed it too well. The ink reached my throat. Words formed without my permission. The book in my hand turned to mirrors. Each page, another me. Screaming. Writing. Sleeping. Running. I saw the ending it wanted. He accepts it. He checks in. He becomes the bellhop. The new writer. But I had one choice left. I tore out the first page. The one with Vane's name. I lit it. With the last match I'd kept in my bag. Since I left that night. The flames ate quickly. Like they were starving. Vane screamed. The motel trembled. The ledgers burst into flame. As the room collapsed. The walls whispered. Unwritten. 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 Part 8, but stories remember the shape of you. Of course. The motel may be gone from the map. But it remembers you. And what is remembered, returns. I woke up in my own bed. For real, this time. I think. The sunlight didn't flicker. The birds outside sang songs I recognized. No whispers. No ink. But something was wrong. My skin no longer bore the mark. Yet I could still feel it. A phantom itch. Where the ink had climbed into me. And on my nightstand. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. From an unknown number. I played it. Only static. Then. A familiar voice whispered. Room 237 is vacant again. I dropped the phone. It buzzed once more. The screen, new message from, your name. I turned on my laptop. Opened a blank document. Typed a sentence. It's over. The motel is gone. But the words faded. Replaced themselves. Line by line. The document began to type back. Nice try. But stories don't burn. They just forget their names. And then. In bold. Would you like to reopen room 237? Yes, no. There was no cursor. No way to exit. Even unplugging the machine didn't kill the glow. The motel wasn't in buildings anymore. It had moved into language. Into memory. Into recognition. It wasn't just me. Friends started dreaming of hallways. People I hadn't spoken to in years. Called to say they'd woken up. With keys in their hands. Plastic diamonds. Room numbers smudged. All of them different. None of them 237. That one was still mine. A former coworker left a voicemail. Hey, weird thing. I dreamed about a motel last night. You were there. But you were older. And you were checking people in. Click. Even my mother. She told me over tea. There's this phrase I keep hearing. Something about, unmaking the bed. The story was spreading. I hadn't ended it. I just set it free. I walked past a bus stop. An ad flickered on the screen. Restless. Unwritten. Spend the night at Moonlight Motel. No one else reacted. I turned to ask the man beside me. But he was staring into space. His lips mouthing. Don't touch the wallpaper. It listens. I ran. Into a bookstore. The fiction section had changed. Books I knew had new titles. Authors I recognized now had unfamiliar faces. And on a shelf near the back, a book bound in leather. Title burned into the cover. Guests of Room 237. By you. Inside, blank pages. Except the last one. Handwritten. You remember. That's enough. We'll write the rest. I sleep rarely. When I do, I go back. Not to the halls. Not to the staircases. I return to the lobby. Freshly waxed floor. Key rack full again. The bell on the desk polished to a mirror shine. Behind the desk. Me. Or another version of me. Wearing the bellhop's hat. Smiling like a mask. Waiting for guests. He always says the same thing. Welcome home. Your reservation never ended. The story still remembers your outline. I try to leave. But the front door. It opens into the same lobby. Every time. I try to write again. To take back the narrative. To finish it. To trap it. But the words resist me now. They bend. They shift. They correct. You are not the author. The document types on its own. You are the setting. And so, I whisper this story to you. Because stories need listeners. Witnesses. Rooms to echo in. And maybe, if you've made it this far, you'll recognize the sound of the hallway. The creak in the wallpaper. The sigh in the bed. Because the motel knows how you feel. Tired. Unwritten. Curious. And the room is always vacant. Of course. You're already holding the key. You just don't remember when it was placed in your hand. Part 9, Keys Left in Your Dreams. It started slow. A whisper. A shared dream. A hallway without doors. Then it accelerated. People began describing the same images online. A plastic diamond keychain. Room number, always blurred. A neon sign buzzing overhead. A bed they couldn't quite get out of. They called it a collective dream. A meme. Nothing more. But I knew better. These weren't dreams. They were invitations. The motel had found a new medium. Sleep. And it was handing out keys. I found them through a forum. A thread titled, "Have you stayed at the motel with no lobby?" 3 names responded. I reached out. They all said the same thing. I dreamed of a room. Then I woke up. And the key was on my pillow. Each held up a photo. Plastic keychains. Worn numbers. All unique. But one thing was the same. On the back of each tag, in gold letters. Return if found to, the story. Then the architecture began to bend. One woman said her hallway now had one more door than before. A closet that wasn't there the day prior. A child drew a floor plan of their house in crayon. And when the parents asked about the extra room, he said, "That's the one I dream in. It has voices in the wall." An apartment complex in Arizona reported a new basement. Beneath a building that never had one. Tenants say the stairs are always there when you're sad. I visited the site. Walked the hallway. Counted the doors. There was one. With no number. Locked. But I could hear breathing on the other side. I began mapping the anomalies. Every instance of dream keys. Phantom rooms. Stories rewritten in real time. They formed a shape. Not random. Not chaos. Design. An architecture of memory. Of need. Of yearning. The motel was no longer a single building. It was a template. It seated itself. In lonely houses. Vacant offices. Abandoned elevators. Wherever someone wished they were somewhere else. It bloomed. And the keys? They didn't unlock the motel. They unlocked you. So the motel could move in. One of the original 3 stopped responding. Their apartment was empty. No signs of struggle. Just the bed. Carefully made. Like no one had ever slept in it. A key. Placed delicately on the pillow. Room 000. Another disappeared during a therapy session. The doctor described it like this. She leaned back. Closed her eyes. And whispered. I hear the bell. It's time. Then she was just gone. Only a draft remained. And a faint scent of antiseptic and dust. In an abandoned records office. I found a blueprint. Unlabeled. Yellowed with time. It was the layout of the Moonlight Motel. All rooms accounted for. 100 exactly. Each labeled not with numbers. But with names. Some of the names were mine. One in bold. One in cursive. One scratched over violently with red. As I touched the paper, it felt warm. Then I noticed. The blueprint was breathing. Faintly. In. Out. As if the story had lungs. Then a whisper from behind me. There's a new room now. It's yours. I turned. No one there. Except a single key on the floor. Tag cracked. Words faded. But the room number was fresh. Room 100. Absolutely. Now we enter a room that should never have been written. Not because it was forbidden. But because it wasn't part of the story. Until you changed it. Part 10, Room 100 was never supposed to exist. Room 100. It wasn't on the original blueprint. Not etched in ledger. Not typed in the system. And yet, here it was. The key was heavier than the others. Warm. Oily to the touch. The tag didn't say, Moonlight Motel. It said, you made this. Not a threat. Not praise. Just, a fact. Because I had. With every word. Every retelling. Every time I tried to end the story. Room 100 grew larger. Hungrier. I couldn't find the door to room 100. Not in my home. Not in any motel. But then. I realized. Room 100 isn't behind a door. It's behind a decision. And mine was made. I chose to find it. That night, I slept. With the key in my hand. And dreamed of. A hallway that never ended. Each door I passed had a number. Until the numbers stopped. Just a white door. Unlabeled. Breathing softly. Like lungs behind drywall. I touched the handle. It sighed. And then. Opened itself. A typewriter sat in the center of the floor. Its keys made of teeth. The ribbon. A thin, wet line. That pulsed like a vein. I stepped closer. Paper already loaded. Blank. But then. Letters began appearing. One at a time. Click. 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 Room 100 exists because you needed it. Click. Click. We cannot be destroyed. But we can be given purpose. Click. This is the room where endings come to wait. I stepped back. But my feet didn't move. The floor was writing me down. Across the room. A final door. Glass. Cracked. Behind it. Me. But older. Emaciated. Eyes like used paper. He mouthed something silently. I leaned closer. He whispered. Leave before you become me. I opened the door. A scream rushed out. But not of pain. It was the sound of every version of myself that I had never allowed to finish their story. They reached for me. Hundreds of hands. Begging. Accusing. Pleading. And behind them all, the motel. Not as a building, but as structure. As thought. As possibility. The room asked for a decision. Not escape. That wasn't possible anymore. It asked me, do you want to become the room? Or the story that escapes it? I looked at the typewriter. The ribbon. The paper that never stayed blank. And I made my choice. I sat. And began to write. Not to trap. Not to end. But to change it. To give it form. To give it rules. To stop it from spreading. Like cancer. Through the dreams of everyone who's ever felt alone. Each word I typed. A brick. A wall. A boundary. Because stories don't die. But they can be shaped. And so I stayed. In room 100. To shape the shapeshifter. To become the lock. To the room you'll never find, unless you need it. Part 11, the guests who remembered too much. Of course. The motel no longer sends out keys. It doesn't need to. Now it sends out memories. And memories spread faster than doors ever could. It began subtly. A viewer of the video said they'd had a nightmare. A hallway filled with breathing wallpaper. They described the peeling strips. The rotten floral pattern. Room 237 at the end. But I never described that hallway out loud. Another said they saw a man. Behind a motel counter in their dream. Bellhop cap. Ink on his fingertips. They said. I think it was you. But older. And then. He said I had a reservation. They weren't writing fanfiction. They weren't imagining it. They were remembering. Something their minds had never agreed to remember. They began appearing in therapy. Not the people. The dreams. Recurring. Motel corridors with no end. Beds that refused to let them wake. Voices whispering names they hadn't heard since childhood. Psychologists chalked it up to collective anxiety. Sleep disorders. Trauma echoes. But in the waiting room of a clinic in Ohio. 4 strangers. None of whom knew each other. Began humming the same tune. At the same time. A jingle. Moonlight. Where your dreams are made to last. They'd never heard it before. They all cried. The motel doesn't need walls anymore. It lives in association. It lives in that second of confusion. When you enter a room. And forget why you came. It lives in smells. Disinfectant and ash. It lives in the split second. Before a familiar name slips your tongue. And leaves something else behind. It's not a building. It's not even a story. It's a concept. With teeth. And now. Every person who hears its name. Rebuilds it in their mind. Some resist. Others. Wake up with keys. An architect in Sweden. Redesigned his office. to match a layout he saw in a dream. When asked about it, he paused, confused. It just felt right. Like I'd stayed there before. His assistant found a floor plan, sketched in the margins of his notebook. At the top, scribbled in shaky handwriting: Moonlight Motel, New Wing. In Australia, a poet published a collection. Every poem named after a room number. The numbers climbed. The final poem was titled Room 100. The last line read: The writer left, but the writing stayed. She vanished before her book tour began. There's a moment for every infected mind. When they agree to forget, they feel the key beneath their pillow, in their palm during sleep, in the space behind the wall. And they whisper to themselves, just one night, I'll check in. I won't open the wallpaper. But the motel hears that whisper as a contract. And then Room 101 is created. Then 102. Then 103. Each new listener becomes a new architect. Each architect writes their own variation. And so the motel multiplies, without ever needing to return to its foundation. I'm still in room 100. At least, I think I am. Every word I write keeps the others contained. Every chapter is a barrier, a trap, a lullaby to keep the rooms from opening too wide. But the paper is growing thin. The ribbon bleeds faster. And now, I hear your voice. As you read this, I hear your breath catching, your heart quickening. The motel is listening through you now, using your ears, your memory, your need to know how it ends. Because that's what opens the next door. Not belief, not magic, just curiosity. And so, if you dream of room 104 tonight, don't open the door. Not because it's dangerous, but because you already did. Part 12, Echoes in the Walls of Houses You've Never Lived In. Of course, the motel no longer needs blueprints. It grows through suggestion, spreads through inheritance, and waits quietly in the rooms of houses you never lived in. But remember anyway. A family moved into a house in Oregon. New build. Fresh paint. Empty. And yet, their 6-year-old daughter asked, "Where's the red hallway?" "What hallway, honey?" She pointed to the back wall of the kitchen. "It was there in my last dream. The one with the man behind the counter." They dismissed it as imagination. Until she started waking with dust on her hands. And splinters. And a room number scrawled on her wrist each morning. Different every time. But always 3 digits. Elderly homes. Foster homes. Places with high turnover. These were the first to bend. Residents began reporting. Cold spots behind closets. Whispers in vents that weren't connected to anything. Floorboards that creaked in patterns. Not randomly, but rhythmically. Like footsteps. Or scratching. Or typing. One resident, age 83, said, "Sometimes, I wake up standing by the wallpaper. And I can't remember if I'm trying to get out. Or let something in." A boy in Belgium began building rooms with his blocks. Always the same layout. He didn't know the name. But he called the long hall the hush way. Said he hears the wood speaking when no one listens. A couple in Vermont discovered a sealed space behind their bedroom wall. No door. No record on the blueprint. When they drilled through, they found a perfectly preserved mattress. And a table. Set for 2. dustless. But no one had been there. The woman fainted when she saw the numbers on the wall. Room 105. Scrawled backwards, as if written from inside. People began recognizing rooms they'd never entered. Hotel lobbies. Apartment bathrooms. Elevators. Back rooms in thrift stores. They would freeze. And whisper. I've been here before. But they hadn't. Or maybe they had. In dreams. In stories. In that moment between sleep and waking. When the room isn't yours. But it lets you stay. Just for a little while. Just long enough. For the motel to make an impression. They draw it. In red crayon. A tall building with crooked windows. And a buzzing sign. They hum the jingle. The one they never heard. But they all get it right. Moonlight. Rest your head, don't fight. One child buried her dolls in the yard. Said they checked in. And wouldn't need their beds anymore. Another refused to sleep in his room. Said it rotates when he closes his eyes. Parents dismissed it all. Until the children began speaking in chorus. Not chanting. Reciting. As if repeating the terms and conditions. Of a contract they never signed. But always remembered. I keep writing. But the words no longer wait for my hand. The typewriter moves on its own now. Each key struck. Sounds like a footstep. In an adjacent room. Each new part one right. Gets echoed. In someone else's life. I've seen photos. Of rooms in countries I've never visited. Painted to look like the motels. Not copies. Reconstructions. As if remembering together. The infection is passive now. It doesn't need doors. Only memory. Only attention. You think this is fiction. And that's good. That's safe. But when you wake tonight, if you hear the buzz of a neon sign, and the bell on the desk, and a soft voice saying, your reservation has been confirmed. Don't answer. Don't respond. And for your own sake, don't touch the wallpaper. Part 13, the room that wakes up with you. Of course. This is where the motel stops waiting for nightfall. Where waking is no longer an escape. Where the room doesn't wait for you to find it. It wakes up with you. She had never read the tale. Never clicked the video. Never heard the name Moonlight Motel. And yet, one morning, she woke up in tears. Mumbling. I was in room 108, and I couldn't find the door. Her parents chalked it up to a nightmare. She was only 7. But over breakfast, she drew a picture of her bedroom. Only, the corners were all wrong. Stretched. Curved. The bed floating slightly off the floor. A figure in the wall. Peeking through a tear in the wallpaper. They thought it was imagination. Until her mother went to tidy the sheets. And found dust under the pillow. That smelled of mildew and old keys. He worked night shifts. Never dreamed. Too exhausted. Too busy. But one morning, he caught his reflection lingering. Just a moment too long in the mirror. His body moved. His reflection didn't. It stared. Pointed. To the closet. Behind it. A space that shouldn't have been there. He hadn't read the story. Didn't believe in curses. Didn't fear dreams. And yet, there it was. A key. Room 109. Taped to the inside of his closet. In his own handwriting. They say if you sleep long enough in one place, your body becomes part of the room. But what happens when the room becomes part of you? People began reporting strange familiarity in their reflections. Smiling when they weren't. A slight delay in blinking. A presence in the mirror. Watching over their shoulder. Tracing their movements. Learning their routine. Soon, it wasn't just mirrors. It was walls. A smudge in the paint. That looked too much like a face. A ripple in the wallpaper. That moved when you breathed. It wasn't decoration. It was observation. The room was watching. Learning. And slowly. Waking up in your skin. People started forgetting which way their own homes were laid out. Turning into closets. Expecting a hallway. Opening doors. Into bathrooms that didn't belong to them. I swore the kitchen was to the left. They'd say. But the house never changed. Only their memory of it did. And each time they got it wrong, they'd hear a noise. From behind the wall. A shuffle. A sigh. A welcome back. The motel had found a new floor plan. They say the worst part of a nightmare is the moment you wake, only to realize you haven't. The sheets feel real. The light seems natural. Everything familiar. Until something doesn't blink when it should. Or a door creaks open. On its own. From the wrong side of the room. One man woke up. 7 nights in a row. Thinking he was in his home. But on the 8th night, he noticed the ceiling. Popcorn texture. Brown water stains. The ceiling of room 237. He never went to sleep again. And yet, the motel followed him. Into daylight. It used to be simple. The motel waited for night. For dreams. For stories. Now, it waits for nothing. Because once you've heard its name, once the architecture plants itself in your mind, you become a node. A doorway. A builder. You are the hallway. You are the whisper. You are the hum in the neon sign. And the room? It wakes up with you. Every morning. Right behind your reflection. Inside the shadow of your pillow. Beneath the buzz of fluorescent light in your kitchen. And tonight, when you lay your head down and close your eyes, if you hear the bell, it's not calling you to sleep. It's telling you the story has entered its final phase. You are now part of the motel. Part 14, the guest ledger is now alive. Absolutely. There was a time when guests checked into the motel by choice. But not anymore. Now, the ledger writes names on its own. And sometimes, it writes them before you're born. It began in room 001. The guest ledger sat under glass. Yellowed pages. Names written in black ink. But now, there are pages that weren't written by any hand. And yet they are written. Names that appear each morning. Names of people who haven't visited. Don't even know the motel exists. But their rooms are prepared. Keys ready. Beds turned down. And beside their name, a timestamp. Not for arrival, but for when they'll remember. They were always meant to be here. A woman in Brazil woke with a start. Dreamt of a page turning. Heard her name read aloud. Later that day, she found a photo from her childhood. A family vacation. She didn't recognize the building in the background. Until she looked closer. A neon sign. Pink. Buzzing. Moonlight Motel. She was 6. She had never been to America. And yet, there she stood, smiling beside a man at the check-in desk, who wasn't in the family. His name was scrawled beneath the photo. The one who knew I'd come back. Birth certificates began changing. Subtly. Middle names no one remembered assigning. Initials rearranged. Nicknames recorded that no one uses, but which the bearer swears feels right. One man legally changed his name to match what he'd seen in a dream. He'd signed the guest ledger in that dream as Mr. Holloway, room 217. 2 weeks later, a hotel reservation was made in that name. He had no memory of booking it. And when he arrived, the clerk handed him the key without asking for ID. "Welcome back," she said. But her eyes weren't hers. They brought it into the lab. A professor of metaphysical literature, a neuroscientist, a linguist. The book did nothing. 4 hours. Still. Blank. Silent. Then the lights flickered. The air turned humid. And in front of them, the page turned. One name appeared. Then another. Then another. Each belonged to someone in the room. Each had signed nothing. Each felt watched. One man collapsed. He'd dreamt that name before, but never shared it aloud. It was the name he used in his dreams. The one no one else could have known. Now, the book doesn't just write names. It writes memories. Entries appear, describing stays that never occurred, but feel true. Stayed one night in room 212. Couldn't sleep. The door kept breathing. Checked into 303 with my sister. Left alone. Heard my mother's voice behind the mirror. She died years ago. And most chilling of all, haven't arrived yet. But I'm close. The wallpaper has started peeling at home. These entries aren't found in the motel anymore. They're appearing in personal journals, in locked phones, on mirrors fogged with breath. People wake to find messages they never wrote in the motel's hand. You think you're reading a story, a haunting little tale, but the motel knew you would. Your name's already in the ledger. Not because you visited, because you listened, because you imagined it, because your mind shaped a room. As you read about it, look at your ceiling tonight. See that water stain? That wasn't there yesterday. It's a map. Or the pattern in your wallpaper. Does it seem to breathe when you aren't looking? Does it ripple, just slightly, when you're almost asleep? And if a key appears in your dream, don't take it. But you already did, didn't you? And when you wake tomorrow, check your bedside drawer. If there's a blank ledger, don't write your name. Because once you do, you won't be reading the story anymore. You'll be part of it. Part 15, The Motel Remembers What the World Forgets. Of course. This is where it all converges. Where stories and structures collapse into one. Where memory is no longer yours to keep. Because the motel remembers for you. You have reached the final phase. It started with a road that didn't lead anywhere. A detour sign appeared on a rural stretch of highway. Drivers followed it. But when they looked later, there was no record of a detour ever having existed. GPS showed them turning, but there was no road on the satellite images. Just dense forest. Untouched land. And in the center, an outline. A square. Too perfect to be natural. Locals said there used to be an orchard there, but no one could remember what kind, or when it vanished. They only remembered the name. Moonlight Grove. Buildings began to vanish. Not all at once, but by erosion of memory. A library no one recalled visiting. but everyone swore used to stand near the square. A neighborhood street that ended too abruptly. A fountain that was always there, though no photos could confirm it. In every case, what replaced them matched no known registry or record. But every structure shared a similar design. Floral wallpaper, water stains like spreading continents, and numbered keys that had no locks. Until you dreamed them. Mapmakers began noticing changes. Rivers that bent ever so slightly. Zip codes rearranging. Streets renumbering themselves. A small town in Nevada vanished from records. The population reappeared weeks later. In a different state. Same names. Same homes. Same memories. But when asked where they were before, they said, "We've always lived here." Behind their town sign was a wooden post. Empty. But if you touched it, you'd swear you felt heat. Like buzzing neon. People forget their pasts now. Not because of trauma, but because the motel remembers them better. When asked about a childhood home, a man described a hallway that had never existed in his real house. When shown a photo of his actual bedroom, he grew pale. Said, "That's wrong. The walls were darker. There was someone living in them." The motel doesn't replace reality. It replaces how we remember it. And memory is the final architecture. What you recall most vividly becomes real. And the motel is vivid. Too vivid. Architectural historians began finding blueprints. With no names. No signatures. No origin. Just dimensions. Rooms. Corridors. Always numbered. Always familiar. In the heart of cities, alleyways began ending in walls that weren't there before. One man chased his dog down an alley in Berlin. When he turned the corner, he saw a building he couldn't unsee. Faded pink neon. Buzzing like an insect dying slow. The word moonlight. Missing its G. He said. It was waiting for me. I think I've stayed there before. He disappeared that night. His apartment stood untouched. The only thing out of place. A motel key. Marked room 999. You are the architecture now. Your thoughts are wallpaper. Your fears, the floors. Your forgetfulness, the doors. The motel builds through your neglect. It expands through your misremembering. Every dream you don't write down. Every name you forget. Every childhood memory that grows hazy. It claims them all. Stores them. Preserves them. Improves them. And then it offers them back to you. Slightly altered. Slightly more vivid. Slightly less yours. And slightly more, its. There is no map now. Just feelings. Vague familiarity. A path through memory that ends at room 237. Or 108. Or 999. Whatever room you feared most. And when you open that door, you don't enter the motel. The motel enters you. You won't feel it at first. Just a little hum. A faint buzzing. A flicker in the corner of your mirror. But then your house will smell of disinfectant. Your dreams will start numbering themselves. And the next time someone says, "Where are you from?" you'll hesitate. Because in that moment, you'll remember. Not your city. Not your street. But the corridor. The endless corridor. The floral bruised walls. The door with your number. You won't say it out loud. But inside, you'll hear yourself whisper, "I've always been checked in." I just forgot until now. Thank you for staying. Some stories wait patiently for their ending. Others, just pretend. But you stayed until the final word. You walked the hallway. Heard the whispers. Felt the motel breathing behind your eyes. So now, here is what was never on the map. A hidden room. Not numbered, not listed. Just remembered. It doesn't appear on any key. No records. No ledger entries. No check-in. No check-out. But every guest enters it eventually. Even if just for a breath. A glance. A shadow behind their spine. This room isn't shaped like the others. It doesn't have walls. It has memories. Your first nightmare. Your almost forgotten joy. The shape of your breath. In winter mornings. When you were too young to know fear. But already knew silence. The motel stores these things. It curates them. Not cruelly. But patiently. Like an archive. That knows the future is written backwards. Inside room empty set. There is no bed. No mirror. No sound. Only one thing. A journal. Open to the final page. The last entry reads. They stayed until the end. They remembered the motel. And now, the motel remembers them. Below that. Your name appears. Not written. Not inked. Reflected. As if the page was a mirror. And your memory. The final author. This room has no exit. Because once you know it exists, you carry it with you. A permanent corridor in the architecture of your thoughts. No matter where you go now. No matter how bright the sun. How crowded the street. How warm your own bed feels. Some part of you will be watching the wallpaper. Listening for the whisper. Feeling for the soft weight of a key in your pocket. That you're sure you never took. And that is how the story ends. Not with a door closing. But with one that never needed to open in the first place. Because it was already inside you. Part 16, The Car That Never Arrived. October Rain. Ramen. Red eyes from midterms. That's how most ghost stories start now. But he didn't know this wasn't his story anymore. A pair of headlights appear. Too old. Too quiet. Too patient. What begins as a silent pursuit through suburban streets quickly becomes a nightmare. The car doesn't obey physics, its headlights flicker like flame, and it drives not around fences, but through people. Each turn leads the student deeper into a neighborhood that doesn't quite exist on any map. Until he reaches St. Mary's Cathedral, where the bells break the cold grip of the vehicle's ghostly passengers. The car was from 1967. But the desperation inside was timeless. They weren't hunting him. They were looking for a ride out. Later, in the dorm, the student finds the old article. A 1967 crash. 6 parishioners racing toward the very church that saved him. All dead. All still seated. All with faces twisted in silent screams. Not every haunting comes from houses. Some are fueled by unfinished destinations. Ghosts of intent. Of failure. And now, when he walks at night, he avoids reflections on the wet street. Because in them, headlights still follow. Part 17, Room 209 is still occupied. Interior, Moonlight Motel, daytime. A young cleaning staff member named Maribel works alone, headphones in, pushing a cart of towels and supplies down the hallway. Room after room is quiet, until she reaches room 209. Her clipboard says it should be vacant. But the door is slightly ajar. She knocks once. Twice. Maribel. Housekeeping. Silence. She pushes the door open. The room looks clean. Too clean. The bed is made, towels folded, nothing out of place. And yet, something about the air feels stale. Heavy. Room 209 hadn't been checked out in over a decade. At least, not officially. Maribel enters, instinctively holding her breath. Her headphones play faint pop music, until the track slows, distorts, and falls silent. She checks her phone. Dead. Then, static. From the bathroom. The sound of a radio, old, warbling. A song from the 1940s drifts through the slightly open door. She opens it fully. The mirror is fogged. The sink runs. The tub is filling by itself. Maribel reaches to turn off the faucet when she sees it. A face in the mirror. Not her own. An older man in a bathrobe, standing behind her, staring. Unmoving. She spins. No one there. The last registered guest of room 209 had drowned himself in the bathtub in 1958. But the water still runs warm for him. The mirror begins to bleed condensation. Letters appear, one by one. Join me. Maribel bolts, slipping on the now wet floor. The bathroom door slams shut. She kicks it open and escapes into the hallway, soaked and screaming. Later, her supervisor reviews the footage from the hallway camera. Maribel running. The door slamming. But no water. No sound. No one else. Some guests check in and never leave. Others check out, but never stop waiting. Part 18, the vending machine at the end of the hall. He couldn't sleep. Not from nightmares. Just thirst. Like he hadn't drunk anything in days. Like something was draining him from the inside out. He walks the length of the hallway, eyes sunken, reaching the old vending machine near the emergency exit. The machine hums, a deeper frequency than he expects. The lights flicker inside. He inserts a crumpled dollar bill. Chooses B4. The machine clicks. Then stalls. He hits it. Harder. Suddenly, the lights inside go dark, then surge back in flickers of red and blue. Inside the glass, the reflection doesn't match his movements. The machine had been unplugged for a decade. But it still takes bills. It just doesn't give snacks. Jonah's reflection stays still even as he backs away. It smiles. Then raises a hand, slowly pressing it against the inside of the glass. He runs. The hallway behind him stretches impossibly long. Each step echoing like thunder. When he returns to his room, panting, the machine hums back into stillness. If you ever see the vending machine lights turn red, walk away. And never, ever, choose B4. Part 19, the wake-up call. Interior, Moonlight Motel, room 111, 2:33 a.m. An old rotary phone on the nightstand begins to ring. The motel doesn't offer wake-up calls. Not anymore. Not since the incident. Cut to, a middle-aged man, Victor, jolts awake. Confused, groggy. He stares at the phone. It rings again. He picks it up. Victor. Hello? A voice answers. Soft. Female. Familiar. Why did you leave me? Victor's face drains of color. His hands tremble. Victor. No. No, that's not possible. You said you'd be right back. I waited. I'm still waiting. He hangs up. Breathing hard. But the phone rings again. And again. And again. Victor rips the phone cord from the wall. Silence. He turns back toward the bed. She's there. Sitting on the edge. Wet hair. Pale skin. The smell of lake water fills the room. 12 years ago, Victor left her drowning. A promise broken beneath moonlight and waves. Now she's keeping her promise. She stands. He backs away, but the room has changed. The windows show nothing. No light. No sky. Just water. Black and still. She steps forward. Time to come back. Victor screams, but it's muffled, as if underwater. The room goes dark. Cut to morning. Housekeeping opens room 111. It's empty. Except for a trail of wet footprints leading to the unplugged phone. Some wake-up calls don't end with morning. Some are meant to remind you of what you never finished.